Three friends boarded Disney's Galactic Starcruiser to seek their destiny and emerged as heroes of the Halcyon. Hello and welcome to Heroes of the Halcyon, the best, and to the best of our knowledge, only Galactic Starcruiser superfan podcast on the web. I'm Galactic Starcruiser superfan Drew, and with me are
Superfan Christine
and Superfan Martin.
This week, we've got another fantastic episode. Christine, can you tell us all about it?
I sure can, Drew. We had Gabi Fleury reach out to us, which we always encourage and enjoy, and she brought an amazing topic to us, which is how to tell your character story through costuming. And for the three of us who were heavily into our characters on our last voyage, the focus that she puts into costuming is just amazing to listen to.
It was such a great conversation. I can't wait for folks to hear it.
Yeah, and especially if anyone is struggling a little bit on how to build your character, how to build your costume, this is a wonderful episode that gives you little tidbits that might get you started on your voyage.
But before we get started with that topic, I do want to take just a moment to send a shout out to all the friends of the show who have signed up to support us at our Patreon page at patreon.com/heroesthehalcyon. We got some brand new supporters this week, which is always fun. And we're starting to send out our first supporter packages. So look forward to receiving all that Hoth team merchandise in the mail.
And before we get started, just one more thing. As we've talked about on recent episodes of our podcast, and Sarah J. Mack from Princess and Scoundrel and Dano presented on his recent live stream, we're sponsoring a meetup before our May 3rd and 4th voyage. That meetup is going to take place on May 2nd. We're working on some awesome details in the background. We can't wait to meet you, and we hope that some of you save the date to join us at that meetup.
So stay tuned to both Instagram and to the Facebook group for the May 3rd through 5th voyage for details to follow. But now, let's talk to Gabi.
Well, we have got such a fun guest this week, and we're going to welcome Gabi to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm so excited to chat with y'all.
Well, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I got into Starcruiser kind of from an interactive theater background. So I did theater minor, and I'm a conservation biology major, and now going into my PhD. So I kind of do both art and STEM. And I'm also a cosplayer and a maker. So I kind of come at it from a costuming perspective as well as an acting perspective, and a writing perspective as well. So I'm also a professional author. So I do all the things, but
that's far too many qualifications, Gabi. I'm afraid we can no longer be talking with you.
I feel terrible about myself right now.
But I think that's why I love Starcruiser, because it you can see all those pieces come together in this really amazing payoff. So from both a gameplay perspective, but also just from a complete geek out perspective, it's a really cool project.
So Gabi, how did you fall in love with Star Wars?
So essentially, prequels came out when I was really little, and I have vague memories of Jar Jar Binks and thinking he was funnier than I think he is now. But I didn't really get into it until I actually was in lockdown and saw Mando. And I think there's a couple reasons for that, is because as a writer, as somebody who's really into storytelling, I was less interested in the superpowers, kind of space wizard Jedi stuff, although that stuff is super cool. But I was really into the idea of ordinary people standing up against oppression and kind of the risks that they have to take in order to do that. So Mando was kind of there's kind of other stories that can be told in Star Wars, and it's a very big galaxy, and there can be different focuses. And then Andor was kind of another kind of flip moment where I'm just wow, okay, we can tell stories about the everyday guys who are literally putting everything on the line. There's nothing special about them at all, but they are risking everything to help their families and help their communities. So I think that's kind of where I got really hooked on Star Wars.
Yeah, I think if you love Star Wars before, Andor is one of those Star Wars stories that you never knew how much you needed it until they put it out there for us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
how did your love of Star Wars then feed into cosplay? Or was there cosplay before Star Wars?
There was a lot of cosplay before Star Wars. I started as a historical pirate reenactor when I was 15. That's kind of how I got better at making costumes, because I didn't want to be an ingenue or a serving wench. I wanted to be a pirate. But, I was tiny and a girl, and being able to have the right kind of outfit that was historically accurate wasn't really possible. And I had no money. So I got really good at making my own looks. So I had to kind of work to historical specs and get on the forums and try to figure out kind of like the best way to create things. And I actually joined a pirate crew of other reenactors who would do performance art and like sword fighting demonstrations and sailing demonstrations. So I actually had to learn how to make costumes very durable. They could stand up to the sun, they could stand up to activity. So when I tried to make costumes, I also tried to make them quite practical. From there, building stuff like different characters that I liked. I had the Star-Lord cosplay that I made on like a budget of like $70. Like it was really hard, but I did it. What I love about cosplay and what I love about creating costumes is not only the visual storytelling aspect, which I'm sure we're going to get into later, but also I learn new skills with everything I do. So that's always really exciting to be able to say like, okay, I didn't know how to do this before, but now I have this whole other thing to add to my toolkit and to continually see improvement.
So when did you hear about the Starcruiser experience, Gabi?
So I heard about it through vlogs. So through, going on YouTube and seeing that this was a thing. So I actually didn't know about it before it opened. I was a pretty recent convert. But as an interactive theater nerd and as just kind of like a gameplay nerd and a video game nerd and an acting nerd and a writing nerd, I was like, I'm getting my butt on that ship, whatever it takes. So that's kind of how I connected up with Callie and one of your other guests on the podcast and some other people that I didn't know through the Starcruiser Sweet Finder. And we all kind of like mega fanned together and became really good friends.
So once again, we have another Starcruiser Sweet Mate Finder success story.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes, that's
love
super
it.
cool. And I have to bring this up too, because this I know is on your bio, but I really would love to share this with our listeners. So what was the Forbes piece that I saw on your bio?
Yeah. So Forbes magazine puts out a 30 under 30 list and in different fields. So I was one of the Forbes 30 under 30 in science. What was really cool about that is, conservation biologists don't really get the same kind of attention that geneticists or engineers do. Those are kind of like the sexy fields that everyone's doing innovative work in. But we're doing innovative work as well. And we're just as much scientists as somebody who wears a lab coat or somebody who, works in building a robot.
Yeah, nice.
Really important that, especially as a person of color, that being one of the few wildlife conservationists who has gotten on that list, to show people that this is a field that you can go into. It's worthwhile. It's important. Yeah, it was a real honor to be mentioned and to be able to bring that awareness to my field.
Well, Gabi, when was your first voyage on Disney's Galactic Starcruiser?
So I was in the August 8th through 10th voyage, which was super fun. And like I mentioned, I had Callie on my voyage. I had a couple other people that I bonded really well with. And it was hot as heck. That was the only not great thing about going at that time. But, I loved our cast. So we had a fantastic time at that. And also just kind of the lead up. I think we started prepping in March. So we had a good kind of long time to get hyped and get excited and meet each other on Zoom and get ready to go on.
When you went on your voyage, did you guys form a group? Were you shipmates? Did you have that as part of your story?
So it kind of organically happened. So my character has a ship. She's a smuggler captain. Galactic goods redistribution specialist. It's like, but yeah. So because she has a ship, we kind of just naturally formed a crew, and we kind of had our characters were really interesting because I don't know if you heard of the trope, like the 5-man band, where they all have specific character trope ideas and roles. We just kind of naturally all had that. So we fit together perfectly. So it's we had a technical specialist. We had the guy who was kind of the public relations guy who was kind of sketchy, but really important to kind of show a more positive face towards the crew because we were all a bunch of smugglers. So yeah, so we ended up kind of creating this crew and then creating almost a mini culture around the crew, which is really, really fun. And then trying to bring people into that mini culture, going to Sublight and being join our crew, we're recruiting, and trying to bring people in that way. Let's do crime, so that was, that was great.
Well, Gabi, I'm dying to ask, what's the name of your starship that you're captain of?
The Revenant, because my character was betrayed by her mentor and left for dead. And then she basically came back and did a 3-year process to try to get her ship back. So she named it the Revenant because she came back from the dead.
So from one captain to another, tell me a little bit more about your character design. I mean, I know that piracy obviously played into it, but what kind of work did you do once you guys settled on, yep, we're going, between, like you said, that March and August when you got on the ship?
Oh, that's a great question. I have an obnoxiously long bio, including a trope list, because I can't help myself. It's like 17 pages of stuff. It's basically, she's kind of like a lovable rogue archetype. So as I mentioned, she's an ex-pirate. She's a galactic goods redistribution specialist, and she's from the Outer Rim. So her kind of character concept is like she has this very fearsome reputation, but she's kind of got a secret heart of gold. And because of that, she's a supporter of the resistance, and she's helping smuggle information to the resistance and smuggle goods, but she's trying to hide it under this hardcore, I don't care, I'm just in it for the credits kind of attitude. So I kind of describe personality-wise, I'm like, if Malcolm Reynolds was maybe a bit younger and more idealistic, or if Star-Lord was a little bit more strategic or cunning and less kind of like goofy, that's kind of where the character kind of falls in. But yeah, in terms of design, one thing I try to do when I create a costume is I want them to be very distinctive. My goal is I want the character in silhouette to be distinguishable. Like if you just saw like a drawing of it, you would know it's that character. So it actually started because I was in a thrift store and I saw this awesome beat up leather jacket, like leather coat, like a knee length leather coat for like $30 that was very Hondo Onaka and had like big lapels. And I'm just like, okay, most smugglers have vests and they have, fingerless gloves. And yeah, I wanted that too. But I'm like, I need that coat. Like that could be a very kind of almost iconic looking thing that I could do. So I built that out. I put EVA foam on the lapels to make them even bigger and more sci-fi. And then put like a leather pauldron that I made on one shoulder, and then put these very blue accents. So the whole idea is that her ship has these blue, almost clan stripes, which kind of comes from her piracy background. So she wears that electric blue as accents to kind of show affiliation towards her crew and loyalty towards her crew. So it's like a lot of browns and weathered blacks and stuff, but it has like these very sharp blue pops. So yeah, so that's kind of where I kind of came at it. So it's like, how can I make it visually distinctive, but also tie very well into kind of this character story? And the idea is that this character, it probably was on one of her first battles. Like this dude died. She liked his coat. She kind of stole it off the guy. And it's kind of the one thing she's kept from her time as a pirate.
Would the official members of the Revenant crew, would they also be having these blue accents? Would she kind of encourage that with her crew?
Yeah, so one of the people like is going to be doing that in our reunion cruise. So he also is going to have some blue pops. I actually have a logo for the crew. Like we have a ship logo. So we're all going to have patches so people can kind of like identify us as a unified force.
Oh, that's super awesome.
Cool.
I'm kind of envisioning like the Ravagers and Guardians of the Galaxy, how they have kind of a unified look to their stuff. Is that kind of the same idea-ish?
Yeah, it's kind of the Ravengers was a kind of a big visual inspiration for me, kind of like especially like Yondu. So kind of that look of kind of the long coat and like the leather accents and kind of this very organic looking appearance, I think is really cool. So trying to stay away from kind of like the Mando very like clean look, like in terms of like they all have the same shape of armor. But kind of this idea that here are all these ragtag randos, but they are part of like one unified force.
The Ravagers is actually a really, really interesting visual cue to take from, because there's this whole crew of mercenaries, really is what they are. But Yondu specifically, it kind of goes back to what, Gabi, you were saying, is you have to have a distinctive silhouette. And look at Yondu. Yondu, among this all crew of mercenaries, Yondu stands out specifically. He's got the fin, got the blue skin. Again, a lot of them have got similar outfits, kindish, but Yondu, you could pick Yondu out in a half second.
Good point.
Of that. I really cannot stress enough the value. And Gabi, you said it exactly. You have to be not just visually distinctive, you have to be distinctive in silhouette.
Yeah, and let me interrupt you really quick, Martin. I would say you don't have to, of course.
Yeah.
But something that we've talked about often, and Gabi, I'm curious about your perspective too, is when you're on the Starcruiser, if one of your goals is to, make a connection with folks and help be memorable, it's not a requirement, but if you're visually distinctive, that certainly can't hurt.
Yeah, if your goal is to be noticed and have that be a huge part of your voyage, you have to. It's just not enough to look different. You need the distinctive silhouette. I've never heard someone put it so succinctly into a phrase, but distinctive in silhouette. I mean, like Captain Mali, Christine's character is so distinctive in silhouette. She was actually able to get a tattoo literally of her character's silhouette, and you know exactly who it is.
Right.
Gabi, that is fantastic advice.
From your experience on that first voyage, Gabi, did you find that helped your interactions with the cast?
Heck yes. So I was going to go hardcore resistance. I actually posted a meme in like one of the Facebook groups or I was going to go hardcore resistance because my character is secretly like, do you hear the people sing? Like very, in for it. And Rafe saw me and he just like immediately was like, you, me, we're going, like, we're coming. And I'm like, really? Like, he's just like, yes, you're coming with me. So I do think that helped. And the other thing I did, I'm actually going full Twi'lek on this next voyage, same character, but full Twi'lek. But basically, I also had a blue, like a horizontal blue stripe over my eyes. So even across a room, like they could see me. And that was kind of the idea, that I wanted to be able to have kind of that color pop where they would be kind of drawn to finding me in a crowd.
So what is the name of your captain's character?
So her name is Captain Vesna Voss. She goes by Ves for short. And that was a very deliberate choice because Vesna is actually a Slavic goddess of spring and innocence. So I'm going for both kind of a deconstruction of the idea that my character is quite, like she's been through a lot and maybe she isn't like as idealistic as she used to be, but she also is quite young. So it kind of ties into that kind of like she's still got some idealism to her, but it's been recently tarnished. So I wanted to kind of like play off that name. And also Vess is a very short, easy name to remember. So I wanted to kind of have a nickname that characters could easily remember.
Gabi, that's a fantastic idea to, you have his, whatever name you want to have for your character, but to have a short kind of nickname that, not only is easy to remember, but people feel special when they're allowed to use your nickname. That works on so many levels.
What's really funny though, is that it was cool seeing what characters called me by my name, by my nickname, and by my title. So Lieutenant Croy and I kind of had like, I would troll him and he would like try not to break character. That was like our relationship, where we would basically have kind of like, because I'd be like, I'm a captain, I outrank you. And he's like, you're on your own ship, it doesn't count. And I'm like, do you have a ship? So like we had kind of that relationship. So he would always call me captain and I'd be like, lieutenant, and like, kind of like that whole ranking thing. Wraith called me Vess, and he was the only character to do that because we bonded the most kind of like on my path. And then you have like some other characters who would call you like Captain or Captain Vess.
So you mentioned some of those, the gumbo stew of your character inspirations with a lot of things that you mentioned. How did your costuming play into the story that you were trying to tell with this character?
I kind of describe the overall design. When I ever create a costume, I think character first and then costume. Some people do it the other way around, where they're like, I want a Coruscant look, and maybe then they do like a character from that planet. But I always do character first. So I think of age, gender, where are they from? What planet? What kind of environment are they from? Are they from like a desert? Are they from like a jungle? Because that would be different clothing and also different weathering techniques that you use. I think of what's their financial situation. So what kind of money do they have? Or how much do they value wealth? Are they poor, but they want to appear wealthy? Or are they fine with like looking poor, for example? So my character, she is very, very, very weathered. A lot of smugglers will kind of try to have kind of like a respectability around them to get business. And what I wanted to do with that is I wanted her to be like the kid tech CEO who like wears Converse while everywhere else in the company has to wear suits. She kind of has a bit of like arrogance to her where she's just like, it doesn't matter what I look like, I know I'm good. And the whole idea is that if people underestimate her, it's actually to her advantage. So she kind of is kind of like, very, very weathered, kind of, she looks like she's down on her luck, but she's actually kind of a very calculating, I know what I'm doing. I don't need to prove myself to people that respect me or they don't, get off my ship. So that's kind of where I got the idea from that. And then in terms of weathering, like she's from Panema Terminal, which is a desert planet located near Jakku. So they have these ionic sandstorms. So everything I owned had to be beaten up.
Oh, yeah.
So I was thinking of like not just battle damage, but like she probably uses her coat as a shield from sandstorms, right? So like that kind of helped me figure out that, and kind of I wanted a very dusty look. But also in terms of like story, so Vess is a very like sentimental person. She pretends that she's super tough because she kind of has to be, but she really is a sentimental person. So one of the coolest things that I was able to do was put people's initials in Arabesh, like my crew's initials and people who mattered to me and people I met. I had this little pen and I would write it on my armor. So they were always kind of a part of her journey and kind of a visual reminder of this is who she's fighting for. And also the idea of that she'll have armor that was from kind of like her adopted dad who was murdered. She'll have clothing that she picked up on her adventures where maybe she could get better gear, but she's sentimental, and it's a way of kind of keeping them alive and remembering them and honoring them.
Did you get a chance to tell any of those stories? I mean, I know it's one of the things that we found from our first voyage is I remember the cast came up and said, "What's your name?" And then I immediately told them my 20-minute backstory, which is not what you want to do, by the way. But did you ever have a chance to have any of those moments where you would describe what some of this stuff meant to Vess?
Yeah, so I didn't get a chance to explicitly do that, except for 2 moments, which I'll kind of describe. One is to convince them to let me get the secret pin. I pulled out a wanted poster that I made and literally said, look, you could turn me into Lieutenant Croy right now. Here's my collateral. Like, show me the thing. And that actually did work. And I was able to say, like, because one of the things my character was arrested for was excessive sarcasm. So it's like destruction of first order property, 25,000 credit, like bounty, excessive sarcasm.
That's great.
As like ranked. So yeah. So I got to do that. And then the other moment was Gaia. So Gaia really stuck with me. So my dad is Afro-Brazilian, and I have this sense of I don't really know my heritage. We know my family is from Africa, but like, what does that even mean? And that's one of the reasons why I was keen on going Twi'lek in this next voyage, because Gaia and I had this really great interaction where I went up to her after her performance and I said, like, thank you for that, not just for what you performed, but for the fact what it means that someone can come from anywhere and inspire people. Like, that means so much to someone like me. And I was like really genuine about that. And she and I did like a one-on-one scene where she picked me after the heist and like literally just like meet me in the cargo hold alone. And I was like, she's not going to show up. There's no way she's going to show up. And then Gaia comes out through the cargo hold. And I was like, what? So it was just me and Gaia. And she was trying to get me to help her with the coaxium smuggling, where she's like, I need you to do this. And I, in character, and also kind of genuinely, I'm just like, look, I'm a smuggler, but like, this isn't my bag. I'm not a hero. And she said, I think you're both. And it gave me so many feelings.
Yeah.
Just like, okay, queen, whatever you want. Like, I'll do it. It's fine.
So this is an audio medium, but when you just told us that story, I know you can see us on Zoom here, but for you listeners at home, the three of us just looked at each other and just expressed. I mean, that's super amazing.
I think you're both like, wow.
The Gaia character is so brilliant as I don't know the right word to use, but that part of the story really adds something besides just the action adventure and the thrill a minute. It really makes something that's emotional and has the possibility of creating these connections that you've mentioned, Gabi. I know that Christine, you had similar connections with Gaia as well.
So I think part of the magic with Wraith and Gaia actually, and their relationship is that, Wraith is one of those characters that we've heard over and over again, that he is immediately engaging and immediately bringing on this path to where you're, he says jump and you say, how high, and can I do it again? I mean, there's no questioning what you would do for Wraith. And then that leads into a story beat that in the end, you're kind of feel almost like you've all got a one-on-one with Gaia.
Yes.
Once you're at that end piece and you're all kind of congregated together, the actress playing Gaia is very, very good about making sure that she's making eye contact with everybody in the room and that they understand why everything that happened up until this point is so important. And then you feel important. And then, oh my gosh, the stakes just rose to the roof and I didn't even realize it. And I'm really a part of Star Wars. Like, it's just epic in every way possible.
So we're tiptoeing around spoilers, which is fabulous and so good. But Gabi, in the same vein, did you have that same kind of experience when you had your voyage?
Having a connection with Gaia was kind of interesting, where my big thing is that as a character, Vess really wants to belong somewhere and really wants to be of service and be useful. So I think it was really cool to be able to connect with Gaia and be able to, no spoilers, but there is kind of the sense from Gaia that she kind of came from nothing to become the rock star queen that we all love today. And yeah, I think that was kind of the connection point of, someone can do something great no matter where they start from. And I think that's a story that we all need to hear as people, that no matter where you start from or no matter where you come from, that isn't where your story ends.
Well, from a costuming standpoint, this is kind of an interesting question, is how familiar were you with the characters that you were going to meet on the ship?
In terms of like, how much did I know about those characters on Starcruiser?
Like, what was your level of spoilers going into the voyage?
All of them.
Okay.
Literally. I'm a researcher. I researched. But it was one of those things that was really interesting is because I kind of went in going like, oh man, maybe I ruined this experience for myself. It didn't matter. It literally made no difference. Even though I knew what was going to happen roughly, I didn't expect the amount of emotional investment I had. Some of the critiques of Star Wars, people are just seeing vlogs, and it kind of looks maybe a little goofy as an external observer. But what that doesn't show you is kind of like how you very naturally and very quickly get into it emotionally, and there are like real emotions involved in your activities on Starcruiser. So kind of from the LARPing aspect, I got even more into it than I expected in terms of like story beats affected me more, or I was like pulled in different directions than I expected. So I definitely think that like, yeah, it's great to avoid spoilers. But if someone does accidentally spoil themselves, it's not going to wreck their experience.
What's kind of interesting with that is the more you know about the characters. I mean, some people aim for a specific path on the Starcruiser. I think it's better to just kind of go with what happens. But from a character design standpoint, it's actually really good to have a character that can go in several different directions. I mean, if someone goes in with a character design that really elegantly only fits in one pathway, it can be limiting. But like the character that you went on with, Gabi, really is very flexible from a storytelling perspective. That's kind of important for people to consider when they're kind of constructing a character.
Yeah, the only thing that I wasn't going to do character-wise is First Order, but she could have gone any other direction. It was funny, though, because I do think that what you wear does potentially impact what characters initially interact with you. Because, like I said, I was going Resistance. Like, Keevan kind of was side-eyeing me a little bit. And Wraith was like, my people! I do think, like, kind of looking more smugglery did kind of initially draw him to me. And he also kind of, I've noticed kind of, at least that actor, like, if you have a very flashy costume, like that also kind of draws his eye. He likes shiny things, I'm sure, as a character. Yeah, so I do think kind of if you do know that you're interested in something, like you want to go Saja path, dressing like in Saja-ish clothes never would hurt anything. But it doesn't dictate what you do. It just kind of might shape you in a certain direction to start, and it's up to you what you do from there.
So I know you're planning this kind of same character for your second voyage, but let's go on what you just said. If somebody wanted to dress as a Saja, if they wanted to aim down that path, so you mentioned dressing plainly and trying to be more of an ordinary citizen. Would you kind of lean into that look, or how would you try to do it?
Yeah, you could do kind of like a vaguely Jedi look, but without kind of like trying to be flashy about it. So maybe you have some kind of like earth tones, kind of very flowy. So trying to get kind of like that original kind of Jedi look without being like, I'm carrying a lightsaber. But I also think the biggest thing around that would be interacting with the Sajas and expressing that you're interested in the Force, or maybe you know a little bit about the Force and you're trying to learn, is more likely to make them bring in and be like, cool, like let me school you in like the Force. But also that could be a really cool character arc for a person when they kind of come in being like, I'm not sure like if I can do this. And then they gain abilities through like the lightsaber training connection, or through maybe something they do elsewhere on the ship that kind of makes them more confident and makes them being like, okay, I am one with the Force is with me, kind of thing.
That's really interesting that you bring up Chirrut Imwe. That, I mean, what an interesting, unusual character design he had. I mean, just, he was definitely Force sensitive and or Force aware anyway, but he didn't look like any Jedi we had seen. But it was still looked very in universe, very plain. But see, that's the trick for designing for the Jedi path. A character is Jedi aren't flashy. From the storyline perspective, they're not a flashy, costume, but you still got to be distinctive enough where they notice you. So that's always the balance with the Jedi path.
And again, I don't think you have to be, but it certainly wouldn't hurt. Right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're trying to draw the Jedi in, the Saja in, I should say, on the ship, it's just that one's a tough one to kind of toe the line for. You got to be visually distinctive because you don't want to be ignored by other characters, but you got to draw the Saja in. But Chirrut Imwe, that's a really interesting point that did not, it was super visually distinctive from other Jedi outfits we had seen.
Yeah, and you can also do like fun things. Like for example, if I was designing something for someone who wanted to go Jedi, but who like was kind of in that beginning stages, I'd be like, okay, like maybe you do the Earth tones Jedi thing, but then you have like a Cal Kestis harness, or you have like a pauldron, or you have like a droid, or you have like one at least distinctive part of your costume that does distinguish yourself. Or you could play with color. Like maybe you have the traditional Jedi silhouette, but it's like magenta because your character is super out there, but also interested in the Force. And maybe like the Saja almost kind of like side eye them where they're like, can they really learn? So you could like, play with color, play with texture.
All right, Gabby, that's really fascinating. And we're going to just continue putting you on the spot because this is just gold. Is if someone was to design or from scratch a First Order inspired outfit. Now, again, without going into the full, jackbooted, black, solid black outfit.
Not Imperial officer or First Order officer.
What would you do to kind of jumpstart a First Order inspired outfit?
When I think of Jedi, I think very organic materials. I think linens. I think kind of like rough textures. Rough around the edges and kind of like one with the earth kind of looking things. When I think First Order, I think the opposite. I think hard lines. I think asymmetry. I think sharp. I think shiny buttons. I think color-wise, blacks and reds and grays, and not kind of a lot of like gentle curves to the outfit. Like I said, kind of like sharp looking things. One thing they might want to get is kind of like an asymmetric sweater that kind of has a very sharp pointed line kind of at the bottom. Like that would be a very kind of First Ordery look. And then if you want to do a color pop, you could do like a sash. You could do like a white sash or like a black sash. You could, if you wanted to, even like add some insignia somewhere. A fun thing to do might be to, on the inside of a jacket, have like a little First Order symbol, because maybe you are a First Order supporter, but you don't know how other people are going to react. So you might want to go up to Croy and be like, I secretly am on your side. Like, don't tell these guys because I don't want them to be weird with me. So I think that you can do a lot of things with that. So yeah, you want it to have more kind of like an industrial, professional, almost uniform-y look, even if you aren't doing a uniform.
Gabby, you just gave an absolute gold nugget to folks in costume design, is to have a hidden element.
Oh, that's super cool.
The costume.
Yes.
That again, where you can choose who you reveal this to and when. That's absolutely. It doesn't have to be anything huge and complex, but just to have a hidden something.
I had that too. Yeah, I had a resistant badge under my lapel that I made. So like, if I wanted to, I even did this on the tube where I'd be like, ignite the spark, put it down. So I think that's really important because, as we've seen, sometimes people who go like full jackboots can get excluded from certain things because resistance characters might be like, hey, you kind of look like a First Order person. So having something that's a little bit more neutral, but having the ability to kind of show your allegiance when you want to, I think is a big help.
So staying in that same vein, how would you look at a resistance character and kind of start from scratch to let people know on board, I'm with you, I'm in the resistance?
Cool. Yeah. So there's two different ways you could go about doing this. You could go outward resistance supporter, or you could go secret resistance supporter. So it kind of depends what you want to do. If you want to go outward resistance supporter, you can go as out there as being a pilot on vacation. I mean, you could do that if you want to just be an X-Wing pilot. I know people have done that. But in terms of just a general resistance look, I see it almost similar to like a smuggler look, except maybe not as grungy as like a deep down outer rim smuggler. But you have like your earth tones, you have your pleated sleeves, like that very iconic kind of stripe on your sleeve gives kind of a resistance kind of, I think like a Rogue One kind of Jyn Erso look would be kind of in my head like a resistance look, right? You might want to have a hood so you can hide from the First Order on Batuu. And kind of like in terms of colors, I think browns, I think greens, I think these organic colors, kind of similar to a Jedi, but not the same cut of clothes. And vests, I think fingerless gloves, I think, cargo pants, anything that would kind of fit into kind of like a safari look is kind of like a resistance look.
It's pretty cool.
So that's kind of what I think in terms of that, where you kind of want to be somebody who, the resistance is different from the First Order because they don't have the resources. They're kind of a guerrilla movement. So you're not going to have a bunch of fancy stuff, most likely. If you're part of the resistance, you're going to have whatever stuff you scavenge because you're in like this fight against this giant force. So think underdog. think whatever random stuff that your character could find. Some fun things you could do would be like a pair of binoculars or like a comm unit or things like that. And I also think in terms of costuming, like not just what looks cool, but what's useful for your character. So what would your character have on them that they would just use, and then use that to inform what props you have. And then in terms of like the secret resistance person, you could literally be anything. I had a friend who went as a Haitian dignitary. He was pretending to be a Barquess. He was secretly a resistance operative, where he had like a secret resistance symbol, but he was very like fussy and like acted like he didn't care, but he actually was a resistance supporter. If you're going that route, you could literally kind of dress as whatever you want, but then have kind of those hidden insignias. Or one thing I always tell people to say, which is kind of fun, I don't know if this is too spoilery, but just go up to Resistance character and just be like, you've ignited the spark of my curiosity. And they're like, oh, you know, like just salt in these ideas of like, I am for the Resistance without being like, go Resistance. So you can also be kind of like subtle about it as well. But that's kind of like my general guide. It's like stick to your earth tones, anything that looks kind of naturalistic and kind of rougher fabrics. So you want to do like linens or kind of like even some felts. You could do kind of like anything like muslin. Yeah, that would be kind of my general guide.
I just see Gabi like walking around Galactic Starcruiser, like opening up this thing and it's got the first order, opening up this and it's got the side. You're going to play every angle here. But that's outstanding. And something else, Gabi, that you mentioned that I really want to, focus on for our audience is to have insignias that are visible to anyone on, because it's a conversation piece. A character can come up and say, well, what is that?
Oh, like the logo she was talking
about.
Yeah,
the logos. And I think that's fascinating because, again, make it something that's not immediately obvious what it is. It's just a conversation element to get something jump started. This is the insignia for the Revenant. And then it kind of just instantly draws people in. I mean, this isn't costume design 101. This is costume design 303 we're talking here.
Yeah, and it's things that provide story elements that can provide more moments on the voyage for you to interact with people, not just the cast, but again, fellow passengers. Did you have any experiences like that?
Yeah, so I think being able to kind of be very visual, that I was, a certain character, helped me kind of connect more with other passengers because they kind of immediately knew who I was. So one point that I kind of want to make is time is of the essence on Starcruiser. You don't have a lot of time, and you don't have a lot of time to explain yourself. And it's hard to like sit down and info dump things at people being like, this is who I am. So that's why visual storytelling is so important. So people can immediately kind of be like, okay, I get a sense of what you're about and then connect with you on that.
And maybe make a story in their head too that.
Yeah, but it's also fun to kind of like deconstruct that because maybe they're looking at me and they're like, okay, you're just kind of like, you're a scoundrel. You're only in it for the credits. And that's kind of like Lenka was a little bit at me that for a while. And at the end, I was kind of like, some things are more important than credits. And we had like an arc. So sometimes it's also good to play about like, when I think of costuming is what your character chooses to wear. It's your character's chosen skin. So it's not just about who you are. It's about what does your character want to be perceived as. So think about the difference between how you're presenting your character and what your character really is. And does it work to their advantage or not?
Well, I know that, Christine, your story with Malie, you were trying to portray a character. Do you think Captain Malie chose her costume, as Gabi said, as a skin to advertise to other people?
Yeah, I think that, with the initial idea of combining two characters, Maleficent and a Twi'lek, that the idea is that the colors, specifically the makeup, was going to be the first, it looks like Maleficent. But then with the
Leku.
With the Leku and, more of the, like cargo type pants and whatever, it was more of a Star Wars type look. So yeah, I mean, definitely I was trying to make sure to get both of those pieces across in what I was wearing.
Well, and you have the pop too. Your outfit has the purple, and I'm bad with clothes, but the
turtleneck.
The turtleneck. So
hot turtleneck, Florida hot.
Yeah. But that was another way to provide something visually distinctive. Was that part of your mindset as well?
Again, it was more the colors of, if you look at especially the cartoon Maleficent, there's a lot of black with a little pop of purple, but then her face being that kind of greenish blue, the, really bright lipstick and really obnoxious eye makeup, that part of it I wanted to make sure to keep. So you could definitely see that it was two characters combined. And then whenever I say the name, Captain Maleficent, it's like, oh, now I get how it's all tying together.
Well, and since Maleficent is an evil character in Sleeping Beauty, that kind of brings people to think, okay, Malie is probably not a straight and narrow character.
Exactly. She's not here for the resistance, or is she? Yeah, and the fact that, I built that little bit of backstory that, I had posted on Insta before we went, and then we did the character videos just to kind of, explain that, yes, I'm connected with Hondo, my boss. And so there is that kind of rogue scoundrel, but Hondo's also another one of those characters he's in it for the money, but he's also like, all right, I guess I'll help you guys. You know what I mean? Like, he's built a little bit of friendship with several of the Jedi that he's willing to put forth that effort. But, if the money's good, he'll help whoever he wants to help.
Sure.
He's a very gray guy.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of trying to portray that too, that it may be Maleficent, which is a Disney villain, but there's a little bit of heart in there too.
So your character, Jorg Sakul, Martin, you obviously had I would say you had the George Lucas flannel, obviously, but you also had the vest. What were you trying to tell a story with the vest and that?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure people understood I wasn't just cosplaying as George Lucas. I mean, very few people know that Jorg Sakul originated as a Kenner homage figure to George Lucas. So I needed something to just differentiate myself, that, I'm a George Lucas inspired character. And the vest just kind of, it looks like a director's kind of thing that he would have with all the cargo pockets and everything. And having cargo pockets is super important because you can carry a bunch of different stuff to hand out and whatnot. But for me, it was just mostly a thing to just visually separate myself from George Lucas, and this is a character. This isn't an impersonation.
Gotcha. Well, and for my character, for Zoran, I have to tell you, the grad student and thrift costume, what I did is I was trying to provide some visual distinction when I was doing the second voyage, and I also didn't want to spend a whole lot of money. So I took apart some Hot Wheels cars. Oh, this plastic thing kind of looks like an antenna. Oh, wait, if I paint it just with some craft paint that's 99 cents at Walmart, make it look like metal, and I stick it to my head, well, now it kind of looks, it shows that I'm a technological character. It shows that I have some skills. And then that led me to thinking of slicing in the Star Wars realm. So the story that I was trying to tell was that I'm technically proficient, and if there's a skill that you need that involves hacking or slicing, that I'm your guy. And Wraith mentioned that a couple times. I also had, I found this really cool thing on Etsy. Sometimes when you make costumes, it's good to shortcut things, and if you can invest a little bit of money. So I bought these hollow, I don't know what they were.
Visor?
Yeah, it was like a visor that I wore that was cool sunglasses, but it looked like I had super sharp visual acuity, and Wraith pulled that into the story. Hey, if we need somebody to look out for somebody, this guy can do it, And so that lent to the story that I was trying to tell with my character.
Well, I have to say that and you had the visor on your second voyage, not your first.
Right.
Again,
yes.
You did want to visually, have some distinction there. And I'll say for the visor was pretty cheap comparatively.
Oh yeah, it was $20. It was very inexpensive.
But what it added visually to your character was so outsized for what you paid for that. I mean, it lit up. It had these really cool LED effects, and it was super striking. So there are pieces that you can use that don't cost a lot, and you got to make sure they don't hinder your movement and whatnot.
Yes.
But that visor, for what you paid for it, was such an incredible boost.
Yeah.
A plus up to Zoran Vox. Grand slam.
And to your point, Gabi, it fit in the story that I was trying to tell, and it allowed characters to maybe make a leap and go, okay, I got this guy dialed in. Now I know how to fold him into the experiences I want to have. So that was fun.
I'm actually going to go a step further. It was so much fun watching you evolve, Zoran Vox, that those visors didn't just, I'm a slicer, so I'm going to get these. It actually worked the other way. You got the visor And then you realized he was a slicer.
That's true. That's true.
Which was super cool because you're right. And the Hot Wheels things, again, you didn't want to do a full Lobot appliance, on the back of you. That's a lot.
I wanted to, but I couldn't figure out how to do it.
But this did the same thing. Super visually interesting. It didn't look like, it was actually kind of a fun story to tell people, once we were done with it, that was just a Hot Wheel undercarriage. That was amazing.
Yeah, and another good point is that you can also get like children's toys, literally like kids' toys online at Walmart on Amazon and just paint them so they look awesome. So my Mando bracers, I could have made them. I really could have, but it would have taken me maybe a month of really hard work in Sintra. And I was just like, I was actually in Galaxy's Edge. It was $20 for like a kid Dinja Djarin gauntlet set. And I was like, I'm gonna paint these. Like, I have tiny arms. I can wear these. And it became one of my favorite parts of my entire costume. And even to the point, like in terms of adjusting it, I just like to make it adjust so it perfectly fit my arm. I just put a little loop in there and I just fed the Velcro through. So for $20, rather than spending a lot of money to like get something custom made or a lot of my time, I just went like, I'm really good at painting stuff and I'm going to paint this thing. So I think also that's a good thing of like, when you're thinking of cosplays, don't think of what something is, think of the shape. The most important thing is shape. So when you look at something, you're like, oh, that kind of looks like this shape. So kind of thinking creatively, not just like, I need to go get this thing because it looks exactly like it, but I can take these shapes and combine them to make a thing, maybe even out of random household objects, I think is a really good thing to do. And like, we all know Greeblies, like you can literally make them out of anything. Like I have a part of a remote like glued to me. Like, yeah, if you have glue and paint, you can pretty much make anything you want.
You can.
Do you use the concept of the inspiration piece to kind of jumpstart? Is there like one piece of your costume that kind of like set the tone, or do you kind of create all of it together?
So for the first like V1 of my costume, it was the coat, where I was just like, okay, like this is who she is. Like she is kind of like this Hondo cool coat person. And then built around it. But sometimes also like you might have an idea of like, I have a general concept, and I always like will recommend people. So if they're going to have a lot of different components, print out like one of those templates online and literally draw your costume as you're designing it. So you can kind of think like, okay, this goes here, and then that might go here. And you can actually also see if you're overbuilding or over complicating things as you're working on it. So I had the coat, and then I literally like drew like a little person and just like drew the coat on. And then I was like, okay, what can go on the coat? And then I'm just like, okay, it's brown. What's a really cool color that goes with brown? I'm going to make it gold because not a lot of people have gold armor, and gold's a very organic, warm color contrasting to very cold first order silver. So that kind of is a hint of like heart of gold. So yeah. So I think like sometimes having that one statement piece can kind of serve as like an anchor point that you can then build the rest of your costume around.
Gabi, that's actually a really, really good point that I kind of want to touch back to is, when you're building the costume, the faster you can kind of design it so you're sure all the pieces work together. But something that I kind of learned that I kind of want to throw out to the group to discuss is, if something's really causing a problem, don't be afraid to step back. Sometimes you got to step back before you can step forward.
Yeah, as a writer, you're familiar probably with the term that sometimes you have to kill your darlings.
Yeah, and for me, when I was designing Jorg So Cool, I needed to take a step back because it wasn't working. I was trying to stay far too close to this one paragraph bio that Kenner did 20 years ago or so, and I needed to say, don't countermand anything that they did in this, but you're not stuck to it. Create something that expands on this, and that actually was a really big freeing step. Is that if you're trying to take some inspiration from an existing character or whatever, don't be a slave to the continuity.
Be flexible, sure.
Be flexible. And again, there's nothing about my character, Jorg So Cool, that specifically is against this really Kenner originated bio, but I didn't go into that. I created my own piece of it in the future after that. And that was a really, really smart move for me because it allowed me to create something of my own.
Yeah. Like, for example, you could take inspiration from original character, but change the color or switch out a piece. So I always try to recommend people like take inspiration, but it's a leaping off point. It's not your end point. Like you're not cosplaying as Han Solo. Maybe you like kind of like the vest he's got on. Why not make it turquoise? Or like maybe like, you could, make it in a different texture or switch things out. So I think is a good way to kind of get like an archetype, right? Like a character archetype idea without having to literally be like, I must look exactly like that person. Because the difference from Starcruiser, like a con, is you're not cosplaying as a canon character. Ideally, like you could like be inspired by, but they're not going to go around and be like, "Hey Han," because Han is dead. So I think like that is your chance to like really become your own person, even if it's just you in space. So I really recommend that like they have this golden opportunity, this creative opportunity, like run with it.
Wait, I need to go back to something you said. Han is dead. No one told me.
Whoa.
Boy, oh boy, we got to catch you up.
Long time, man.
Well, Gabi, I'm learning so much just by talking with you that I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts on what could Disney do to kind of help people jumpstart the character creation. I mean, they did this recent set of 3 videos that kind of helps onboard people before the voyage. You're supposed to watch these 3 videos before the voyage now, and it kind of sets you up as to what the experience is and how to interact. Brilliant move. We've been saying that they needed something like that for.
I'm so glad they did that. Yes.
But the one piece that they're still missing to me, and other past guests have mentioned this, is that they need something to just help jumpstart people in their character creation. Because by the time they get there, the die is cast. I mean, you got to have it ready to go, because the minute that it starts.
Well, people can go to the gift store at the Chandler gift collection, and they can buy some costumes. There's things there.
There are, but it's too late to create a real involved character at that point. And frankly, if you're going to just buy something off the rack at the Chandrilla, collection store, you're going to look like everyone else that bought something off the rack at the Chandrilla collection store, which again is better than nothing. I would absolutely not think twice about seeing someone that was walking around in the saber tunic, which I still want in my size that they never have, and I'm not bitter about it at all. But what, I'm kind of curious, Gabi, what could Disney do or post or send out to kind of just give people some shorthand in how to think about a character?
Style guide. That's what I would do. I'd say like come up with like, I don't think it's a spoiler to say like these are some of the archetypes you may encounter on board. And maybe say like, here are some ideas in your style guide. Like what would a smuggler wear? Here's a vest. Here's fingerless gloves. Here's a thing, or like, and then kind of like, maybe it's like, here are some planets that they could be from. Like maybe they're from Nar Shaddaa. Maybe they're from Coruscant or something. And maybe just have like a very like, like little index cards of like, here is something you might do, but you don't have to. And like have that as like an open point. One thing I always thought would be really fun would be like doing like a quiz. It's like, what kind of Star Wars person are you? And then you do it, and then maybe you get your result, and that makes you think like, maybe I am a smuggler,
You
like,
won't believe number 7.
Exactly. Like that could be really fun. But I also think just having like a basic like note card style guide would be really helpful, because you get people coming in, they're like, I don't know what to wear. I don't know who to be. And I think like one thing I always tell people is like, if you really don't have a character idea, start with you and make it in space. And then you can kind of come into it. So like I've seen people be like Ewok forest rangers because they work for like the Department of the Environment, like, so I think like it can kind of start the inspiration of like, what would your profession be if you were you, but in Star Wars?
That's brilliant.
I love that. And I'm just thinking to myself, like if Disney posted like something like, have the different classes of characters, the smuggler, first order, and then like you said, here's 20 planets, and here's like a 1-sentence description of what's important about you, and just to give people just a general jump. And here's a couple, tops, and by just a couple, it's almost like a paper doll kind of a thing that we had as kids. We're old, we had these as kids, where you kind of just assemble character ideas. And again, I don't want people to be a slave to that, but and I think that some people are really having a trouble taking that first step. And that first step's the hardest one to understand that you have enough inspiration that you can do it. If you make this leap, it'll be worth it. You will succeed. And I would love to see Disney kind of jump into that and give people a little help.
That style guide is
love it.
absolutely brilliant, Gabby. That they really should have a webpage because that's not super hard to make, you know?
Right.
It's all information that exists. They just have to present it in the proper format to address what, here is what this is. We're presenting this. This is a Galactic Starcruiser costuming and character jumpstart. Just the ideas, these all of the questions that Gabby's brought up about, how rich are they? Where did they get their money? How that right there. I've never really thought about like that. Let's just take that one as an example. Where did they get their money? How much money do they have, and how important is money to them? That informs so much about a character. What an incredible! There's so many of these jumping off questions that they could present to just make people go, huh.
Well, it'd be kind of interesting too. I'm picturing in my head as we're talking to almost have like a little video of maybe other characters that are getting ready to board the Halcyon.
Ooh.
And so you could see like in, maybe not the area that we are actually physically in, but almost that it looks like an area where people are, maybe it's a Twi'lek couple with their kids, or maybe it's the Saja gathering to get on board, or maybe it's, what I mean? Like just a variety of different people that are from that era. And I'm not 100% sure everybody understands where the Halcyon fits in the Star Wars universe as far as time is concerned, to maybe just show different people getting ready to get on the Halcyon, and then kind of like, like, we can't wait to see you, or we can't wait to have you on board, or just something that's a quick video that shows a variety of different people, either, decked out to the nines, or our scoundrel friends gathering in the corner, just a variety of different people that you can be like, ooh, I like that costume. I bet I could do something similar to that. I don't know. I think that'd be really fun too.
I think so as well.
Like an in-world commercial where
Right.
they're just like, why are you in the Halcyon? And it's just like, well, like, I'm taking my kid to Coruscant, and like I figured like it'd be good for her to get like a little like, taste of like the high life before we like get to like where I need to go to work, or something like little snippets of like backstory. If they did something really in-world where they had like an in-world journalist like interviewing some random people about like in character, like where are they coming from, where are they going, that could be really fun.
Why are you on the Halcyon?
Yeah.
That is genius. I'm absolutely dumbfounded right now. That's absolutely fantastic.
My new crew is all Alderaanians, and my character has no idea what the heck that is. So they're like, I'm from Alderaan, and I'm like, who is she? Like, she doesn't even go here. So it's like this really like fun like thing of like there could also be generational differences or like life experience differences. Because the other thing that I always recommend is like, if you can think of like where your character is from, like regionally, if you're from the Outer Rim, you probably don't know a lot of what's going on in the core worlds. So you might have only gotten like some snippets of what was going on in the bigger things, or like you might not even know anything about how people live there. So that could be a fun character thing. Where like there was a jokey thing where I had a crewmate who's like he was being a very fancy guy, right? He's a Hapan dignitary, but he's secretly a resistance guy. But anyway, he was very fancy, and like I couldn't figure out how to use the silverware like in character. I was like, what is this? And like joking with him. And it was just really fun character moments of like, think about class as well. Like just in general, like what would your character know? Do they know about the conflict? Or have they literally been living on the outskirts of the galaxy and they're like, there's a fight? Like, do they know who the First Order is? They might not even know. So I think that's also a good point to kind of be like, what does your character know? And also I always encourage people, it's like, your character doesn't know that they're not canon, because once you step on Starcruiser, you're canon. So be canon.
So in all the time that you've been doing costumes, what are some of the lessons that you can help someone who has never done cosplay before and wants to try to do something on a budget?
So in terms of making things on a budget, I'm a grad student. I have no money. The best thing to do is if someone's starting out, don't try to make something from scratch. Find thrift store finds that they can adapt off of those. Because not only will that kind of like cut down the cost, it's more likely to be kind of in world unless you're going for kind of like elite costuming in terms of like, you want to be like Chandrillan fancy person, maybe it wouldn't count for that. But if you are looking for something that's like a little bit more like worn works for you, everyday citizen, it would work for you. And you might even find some pieces in the thrift store that does work for like those really fancy like gowns or things like that. but find your bases in like charity shops or thrift stores, or I mean, even through Amazon. But I always say like you can use something that's been used. It's better for the environment. But yeah, so get kind of those basic pieces and then figure out, how do I make this awesome? How do I take it to the extra step? Do I add like a strap here? Do I add like a color pop here? So I would say that's a good way to start, is kind of come from that almost bounding idea of like, where do I get my base? And then from there, like the way that I start on my like cost cutting endeavors is you pick up skills over time. Don't be afraid to like try to sew something and be horrible at it. But the whole thing is that if you can build your skills where you can make your own stuff, it will be less expensive because your costs are just going to be in materials. So I've made my cosplay. I mean, I have some pretty intense looks. Apart from one like investment piece, which I bought, which I wanted for a long time, everything else pretty much I've made. It's one of those things of like, you're cutting out that middle person because you're making it yourself. And you can customize more because you can find that fabric and be like, okay, I want to turn that into this. So I'd say like for someone who's newer, don't just try to wing it. Like I make my own patterns because I'm a geek and I do this. But if you want to like kind of start, look for like patterns. There are a lot of patterns you can buy that you can sew to. Or like I said, like if you have something that kind of like is almost a smuggler shirt, but you just need to make that cute little like collar pop, you can then get another shirt and cut it together. Like I know someone in the costuming group has done that. So think about kind of like, how can you take what you have, or take what's from your own closet, or take what you can find inexpensively, and then make it Star Wars. Make it so.
You're crossing the streams there.
You're crossing the streams.
So now that we've got all this costuming like rumbling around in our brains now, do you have an upcoming voyage that you're planning for?
Yeah, so I picked up a side gig just to be able to go on the Halcyon again. Gotta love that hustle. But I am lucky enough to be able to go on the May the 4th voyage, which is going to be kind of like a lot of the people from the Facebook groups who are into Star Cruiser are going.
Wait, aren't we going on that voyage ourselves?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Yes, very
That's
exciting.
Awesome. And I guess I'll see you guys in person there.
Yes, you will.
But yeah, so I'm going on that voyage precisely because there's a lot of super fans and some really fun people going. But it was until like literally like 4 days ago that I didn't know if I was going to go. So I was building a costume, not knowing if that was possible, because although I had the money saved up, I had to get my finals moved because I'm in the PhD program. So I literally had to go around to like 3 different professors being like, please let me go into space. Please. I swear I'm an A student. Just let me go into space. And they were like, I guess we can work something out. But it was nail biting because it was all it would take with like one professor to say no, and the whole thing would have been off. So my group was very patient, waiting for me to get that final information before I could do final payment. But it's like due like now. So it was literally right in time. But when I found out, I called my mom, because I called my mom about all the good things that happened in my life. And I was like, I'm going back. Yeah, so I'm doing this trip, and then I have one in Jan 24 planned with my original crew, where we're going to do a reunion, and we're going to go full on continuity storyline as if we've been together this entire time, and kind of like the next step of character development as a crew. So that'll be really fun.
Amazing. That's fantastic.
For me, that's actually been one of the funnest pieces of character development, is that, again, it's Groundhog Day. It's still the same day on the Halcyon,
Sure,
but that you get to evolve your character on that day and move that character forward each time you go. I love that organic growth of the character. Again, it's the same day that you were there before, but you're a deeper, stronger, character because of it.
And to bring it back to costuming and visual storytelling, you could also like build your character arc and your costuming to be part of the voyage, because you have kind of very clear stages. You have day 1 when you first get there, you have your Batu experience, and then you have the afternoon/evening of day 2. So one thing that I'm doing for this next trip is I'm telling a story through the different costumes I'm wearing on those days. So for the first day, I'm wearing kind of like my captain's coat, and I'm covered in armor to show that my character is very guarded, isn't really sure why she's on there, and kind of is keeping people at like a distance. Day 2 is Batu, where I'm going full smuggler and kind of like tying back to my roots. So like my character has like her adult color palette, and then what I consider her childhood color palette. So kind of like she's wearing the greens and stuff that she used to wear when she was a kid, and kind of tapping into her roots and becoming a smuggler again. And then for the afternoon, she's wearing less armor and she's less weathered with kind of a more formal cloak. And that symbolizes her growing into her leadership position, and kind of coming through that coming of age arc. So this might be something that not everyone wants to do, but if you really want to kind of show like your character evolving or a direction that you want your character to evolve, just kind of think about like how you could structure around Starcruiser's itinerary, basically.
Super cool.
I am crazy excited to see all the costumes.
I love the fact that people learn so much because of Galactic Starcruiser, all the different skills that people learn, all the different storytelling techniques that people learn, you know, the creativity that has just exploded as a result of this experience, to me is one of the most amazing things about it. It's the most creative springboard for people. I mean, we have a friend, Patty, she learned how to sculpt an EVA foam and, you know, do a whole bunch of different things. I mean, think of all the things that we've learned. I mean, it's just an explosion of creativity that I can't think of another parallel to.
And the cool thing about Starcruiser is that there really is no way to get it wrong because you're doing your own thing. And I think that kind of opens it up to new people into the hobby. It opens kind of like the sense of kind of collaborativity and creativity because you really are kind of starting from scratch in a way that in a lot of other environments you wouldn't be. So it is really one of a kind.
So, Gabi, I have to tell you, this has been one. We were very lucky because we talked to so many people in doing this podcast. But as always, this is one of my favorites. Just learning about your perspective on visual storytelling through costuming has given me a host of ideas. I think our listeners are going to be inspired. So, thank you so much for joining us and telling us a little bit about your past and how it's informed what you're going to be doing on Starcruiser, so to help inform the rest of us.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had a great time.
May the stars light your way, Captain Vez.
Wow, that was just amazing.
It was so fun.
I mean, it doesn't seem to matter how many of these episodes we do, we always learn something new.
Gabi Fleury really just gave everyone an absolute jump start in how to effectively create a character for Galactic Starcruiser.
It was fun. And to hear the details, I mean, how many times did we look at each other awestruck?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we've been doing this podcast every single week for, you know, close to a year now, and we're just dumbfounded with how many just golden ideas there are that just for shorthand, questions to ask yourself to help you create exactly who your character is and how to costume to tell that story.
And the thing I really loved was that Gabi brought the idea to us via email and was able to say, hey, here's an idea for a future show. And if people wanted to do the same for us, Christine, and send us emails that we could turn into future episodes, how would they reach us?
You can email us at heroesofthehalcyon@gmail.com and find us on Instagram at heroesofthehalcyon, on Twitter at halcyon_heroes, on YouTube at Heroes of the Halcyon, and there's always our Patreon page at patreon.com/Heroes of the Halcyon.
Well, it is always fun to shoot the poodoo with all the Galactic Starcruiser superfans out there. So until next episode, it's our honor. Let's raise our glasses with the Halcyon toast. To Buoy Tay!